Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this weekly Hebrew word study. And we're continuing in the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 17, and picking up on the 20th verse, and remembering that this is laying the groundwork for the battle of David and Goliath. And so as we're getting there, it seems like the groundwork is just a very long process, and we'll conquer a little bit more of that today. So as you can see on our screen as we're sharing today, verse 20, read a little bit of Hebrew for you so you can get a flavor for what it sounds like. And um, so, Vaya Shechem David Ba-Bocher. The Ba-Bocher is in the morning, and Boker Tov is a common greeting of good morning in Hebrew. Vaish Tosh et Hatson al Shomer. This word Shomer, of course, what he's saying here is David rose early in the morning and left the sheep with a keeper. And the keeper, Shomer, is kind of an interesting word that is used throughout the scriptures in reference to um, the Lord and his keeping watch over us. So that's actually quite a precious word when it comes to thinking of how God watches over us. And many Hebrew songs written Shomer, Shomer Yisrael, how God keeps his hand and watches over us and over the nation of Israel. So Vayisa took the things, Vayelech and went, Ka'asher as, and it's a preposition of doing something, and then Sivahu is part of the commandments. And what I like to do when I first start looking at the Hebrew text is to look for the verbs and look for intensity in the verbs to tell what the flavor or what the mood is as this is being read. And so what I look for initially are all the PL words, and you'll see under Sivahu, which is the word for commandment, actually, we see it as a PL. So this is an intensive form. So David's dad was giving him some pretty intense charges here. This was not something he took lightly. This was something that his dad, was adamant about, that he needed to do this. And says, as commanded, ye say, vayavo hamagala, to the camp, vaya Hayil as the enemy, Hayotse el Hamaracha. So as they come out to the fight. And the word that I caught notice on is this word Vehereu, which is for shouting. And they were shouting in the battle, which is a pretty common word for battle. It's Bamilchama. Remember, we had talked about that. You'll notice the word for lechem is in there, the lamed, chet, and mem, and that most battles were fought over sustenance and over food. So the word for bread, lechem, is is a root or base of the milchama, for battle. But what I saw was interesting here is, we know Goliath has his challenge and the armies are lined up on either side of the field. And but why are they shouting at each other? I'm just trying to get a better understanding. And looking at this shouting that's going on, let's just take a look at that word. We'll click on the Strong's. We see it is ruah, a resh with the vav shurik underneath, and the gives it the oo sound, and it ends in the comets, or the patak, excuse me, the patak ending. But the ruach is very similar to the word for spirit. And so we see this shouting obviously is expelling air, giving a blast. It's a sound that goes out. And so it makes sense that it's kind of tied in with the word ruach for spirit. but it's in a hifil form. And hifil, there are 7 verb conjugations or types in Hebrew, and hifil being the one that is in an active state, but it is one that's called, it's causative, meaning that there's something within them that's causing this shouting to come out. And so I think that's very important as we try to understand what is happening in the battle. And that's what makes Hebrew, again, so wonderful, because you can gain that insight that you cannot get from English in these words. And so here we see this is a hifil. This battle is setting up to be so intense that these shoutings and expelling of sounds and the cries, if you will, are happening before anybody's doing anything. No one's fighting each other. They're just kind of yelling at each other from across the way. And what's interesting here is this something they did every day? Or how long has this been going on? We really don't know. Then we get to verse 21, Vaita Aroch, they had drawn up the battle, Yisrael, obviously Israel, and Philistim, the Philistines, and Marakah, the army, Likarat against the army, the Ma'aracha. And so, again, a lot of verbiage telling us what is happening here in this setup. And I think it's all just to make the impact of the appearance of Goliath so much greater, and also to show what state of mind the Israelite army was in, that they're just shouting back and forth. Nobody's doing anything. Saul is not leading them into battle. This is more of just a war of words right now. And so David comes in the midst of this, Vaitosh, and left David at, you'll see this is the direct object marker. So the focus is on the supplies, the hakelim, me'alav. So in al yad, which is the word for hand, another very common word. Shomer, the keeper of the supply, Hekalim, and then Vaya'aratz, and then we get to the word for army again, Hamalak Rakam, Rakah, and Vayavo, Vayishal. And so they greeted him, and again, looking for anything in here that has any intensity, any of the verbs, we see that they are just in this Cal form, what's spelled Qal. So there's no emotion behind it. It's just describing what is happening. And then as we finish verse 22, Le'echav, that's the word for brothers, Achav, and or Ach, his brothers. So it talks about his brothers. He goes to his brothers, and Leshalom, he greets them. You'll see the word shalom in there as part of the greeting. You'll recognize that. So again, quite interesting. And then things start getting a little more intense. Verse 23, Vehu medaber, and that is the word that jumps out at me, is Vehu daber, and it's talking. And we know that there are 2 words in Hebrew that are commonly used for expressing words, and one is amar, which are everyday words, common words, and then there's devar, which are words that are very emotional, words from the heart, words that have a lot of weight to them. And so we see that David is talking with them, and he's not using everyday common conversation. He's talking from his heart. And look underneath that word, daber, and it has a mem preposition on it. So it means it's coming from, these words are coming from him, and it's in a PL form. So we picture a David that is very emotional, very excited, very deep into this, and being caught up in what's happening here, to where these words are coming out, and in quite an intense manner that is a PL form, one of the strongest forms that we can express. So Imam, Vehine, again, hine is sometimes used as an expression to get your attention. And then it talks about, again, interesting here, it has the word ish, which is really the word for man. They have translated as champion. I guess I understand the meaning, but that's not really a correct translation. The next word, the habe Naim, is really the word for champion, and we've unpacked that in one of our previous lessons. So ole, coming up, Goliath, which is the word for Goliath, and Hafil which is Philistine, and Shemo by name of Gilat, Migat, excuse me, from Gath. You'll see what's interesting here is the translation into English is somewhat different. It puts Goth where really it's just a Gimel with a Tav. And so it's Gat and from Gath or of Gath. Then you'll see also these words in brackets versus parentheses, which is the Kere and Kethiv, which is what is written or what is intended, what is read, showing you some of the differences or what you see in the original texts that are never translated, because the translators bypass that and just take what they feel is the best for us to know in English. But here you see it in Hebrew. So again, very interesting study. And so Philistim, via daver, and here David is using the word daver again, and words from the heart. And again, it's in a PL form. And so you could tell he's getting worked up. And here we see another use of that word in Kad Varim, according to the words. So again, these are very intense words to David. He's really taking these to heart. And it reiterates Vayishma David. So he heard them. Again, reiterating almost to a fault of extent of that these words that David is hearing are getting him worked up, and he heard it, and it's motivating him. And again, very, very interesting. And so we get to verse 24, and the battle starts getting more precarious here. V'chol ish Yisrael birotam, when they saw et ha'ish, the man. Here are these soldiers, and they're coming out here every day. They've been here for days and days, and they've heard Goliath. But something about today, when they heard Goliath, it says they fled. Via nusu, that they fled from him. Now notice this is not in an intensive form, it's in a cal form. So I'm not quite sure how afraid they were. Even the word afraid here, mipanav, means from the face of, from the presence of. Bai Yuru, which means they were afraid, but yet it's in a cal form. It's not in an intensive form, but yet it shows that they were afraid, me'od, which is a higher intensity. There's a strength, and they translate it as dreadful, but me'od just means that they were very much afraid. And so we get to verse 24. It says, where did they flee to? When they fled, they were in the battle lines. They were entrenched in. Does this mean that they were somewhat coming out to engage in battle? And then when Goliath stepped on the scene, they retreated back to their position of safety, to their trench, which is kind of what I'm leaning towards. And then we get to the verse where we're going to stop at after today is Vayomer ish Yisrael. So he said, said the men of Israel. Again, there's this little chatter going on here, and they're just taken back. And you'll find some reiteration of this statement a couple times here. And then Haritem, Ha'ish, Ha'ole. Have you seen this man that has come up? Hazeh ki lecharef, to defy et Israel. So here he is defying, and you'll notice this word defy, which is got the lamed preposition in front of it, means two, and then karev is to defy, and it's a PL, very intensive. So this is definitely a strong point here that Goliath is making. And so they're saying, that here's what the king is going to offer. Ole v'haya ha'ish asher v'chenu yaser reinu, that he will enrich him. Um, Nothing, again, very intense here. Hamelech, the king. Um, Osher Gadol Ve'et Bito, will give him his daughter. Again, a little hard to wrap our minds around that kind of offering here. But again, it was a different time, and things were handled very differently. And then it says he'll give him Yiten Lo Va'et Beit Avi, to his father's house. Yaaseh, and then something very, very interesting, probably more enticing than even getting his daughter, is that he's going to be free from taxes. So it's kafshi, kafashi. He's free from taxes. Yisrael. So in Israel, he'll be free from taxes. So a little bit of monetary, a little bit of enticement with the daughter. And what's so interesting here is, why is this Saul doing this? Saul should be leading the battle. Saul should be calling upon on God for direction, but you can see how far he's fallen. You can see how far away he is from God, leaning on his own understanding, trying to entice someone to do what he should be doing. And again, a very sad state of affair for the nation of Israel, but all playing into God's understanding, God using this situation to bring David into the scene. And so next week we'll pick up in verse 26 and see how David moves on from here. So God bless you. I pray you have a wonderful rest of your day, and look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye.